There are moments in life, moments when you make a decision, and with that decision, everything changes. You find yourself standing on the edge of a road, with no return. That moment is when everything begins. That night was exactly one of those nights for melancholiness. It was the only thing that had been eating me up for days, weeks, maybe even years. I was 54, but my soul felt much older. There was no love or passion left in my marriage. Albert had long since stopped touching me. My 65-year-old husband spent his days dozing off on the couch in the living room nights, either sleeping in his study or just busying himself with other things. He was aging right before my eyes, but it wasn't just him. I was withering away too. I felt trapped in this house. The anger growing inside me was turning into helplessness. I wanted to scream, just to be noticed, but Albert wasn't listening. He didn't see me. That's why that night I picked up my phone and called Hector, Albert's nephew, 27 years old, young, full of energy, and the only person who looked at me with real attention, maybe the only one who truly understood me when he answered. My voice was shaking, but I held on to my anger. Hector, come here. Take care of your uncle. I'm leaving this house. I didn't even know why I said. Did I really want to leave? Or was I just waiting for someone to stop me? I knew Albert wouldn't care, but Hector, his voice changed. He understood because I had told him about my loneliness so many times before. Hours later, when the door opened, I saw Albert sleeping on the couch. His indifference fueled my anger even more. But Hector, he walked straight into my bedroom. My hands were trembling as I zipped up my suitcase. I was carrying the weight of my anger, my loneliness, and my disappointment. But there was a voice inside me. Did I really want to leave? Or was I just making a dramatic exit, hoping someone would hear my loneliness? I heard the door open, and when I turned my head, I saw Hector stepping inside. There was concern in his eyes, but behind that, concern something else. Wash-hiding Diana, he said, his voice soft but firm. You shouldn't go. I know everything. Feels like it's too much right now, but we can work through this. I turned my back to him and kept closing my suitcase. But the sharpness in my voice had started to fade. Work through this? I whispered. Albert doesn't even care. Whether I'm here or not, nothing will change. Hector sighed and took another step closer. Don't think like that. You know how we've been lately. It hasn't just been about talking, has it? My body froze for a second. Yeah. When he was around, it wasn't just about talking. There was something else between the lanes. But we had never crossed that lines. Slowly, I turned around. Hector was looking at me, and in his eyes there wasn't just concern anymore. I could see it. He wanted me. Hector's presence had always filled the room with energy. He was 27, young, strong. His shoulders were broad, his jawline sharp, but his smile was warm. He always spoke calmly, but his eyes told a different story. He was the only one who made me feel things I hadn't felt in so long. I knew what he thought of me. The fact that I was Albert's wife didn't change anything. His eyes always scanned me from head to toe, and I could hear that quiet sigh he tried to hide, and I noticed it. He was the only man who made me realize that I was still a woman who could be desired. Before this story excites you any further, please support me by subscribing to my channel and turning on notifications. That way, you'll get to these stories even faster if you drop a super like and leave a comment. I'd be truly grateful. I wasn't in denial either. When I looked in the mirror, I knew I still saw an attractive woman. Years had passed, but I hadn't lost my beauty. My skin was still vibrant, my body still firm and shaped, and Hector was the only one who had truly noticed that he was trying to stop me, but at the same time, he wasn't. And suddenly I realized I didn't want to go. My anger, My loneliness, all of it, was shifting into something entirely different. Hector took another step toward me, his fingers barely grazing my hand. "Don't do this, Diana," he said, his voice low, deep, almost like an echo. "I'm here, and if you leave, you won't really be doing it because you want to." My breathing turned uneven. I completely forgot about the suitcase. I knew I didn't want to leave, but there is, and I was staying. Wasn't Albert the way? Hector was looking at me. That intense stare completely froze me in. Place the space between us had shrunk, dangerously so. At that moment, something inside me sparked tonight was going to be the night something changed for me. But what and how? Even I didn't know yet, something had already shifted the less that had felt like an empty void inside. Me was slowly being filled by Hector's presence, I realized. I didn't want to leave, but it wasn't for Albert. I didn't want anything from him anymore. Hector noticed how my thoughts were shifting. He hesitated for a second. I saw panic flash in his eyes. He thought he had crossed a line. "Look, Diana," he started, his voice a little rushed. "I'll talk to Albert. Maybe we can fix things." I cut him off. Immediately, no. "Hector," I said, my voice now calm. He looked surprised. "But you just said..." I took a deep breath and slowly unzipped my suitcase again. I hadn't fully closed it before, but now I was opening it completely. Hector studied my eyes, carefully hesitated for a moment. "You really think I'm going to beg for Albert's attention?" I said, sharply. "You think I'm going to ask for something from a man I haven't felt anything for in years? No. Hector, that chapter is closed. For me." Hector averted his gaze, looking down at the floor. My words had struck him. He slowly nodded. "All right," he said, "I won't. But Diana, you've always been a woman who deserves attention. You're smart, and you're beautiful. The fact that you've been ignored..." I wondered what he really wanted to say. But I didn't ask, because I already knew Albert. I said, softly, "He's gone on Saturday. 2 days from now, until then. Act like you're just here for a visit." Hector tried to figure out why I was saying this, why he asked. I took a few steps toward him, closing the distance between us. I wanted him to understand that I wasn't running from what I felt tonight, because I want to open up to you first, I said. And that one sentence changed everything between us for those 2 days. Hector played his role perfectly, hected like he was just here for a short visit. Albert, as expected, noticed absolutely nothing, and me time dragged in, painfully slow, the fake conversations. Albert pretending everything was normal, watching Hector's quiet anger grow inside him. It all suffocated me, even talking about it. Now makes my chest tighten, because those 2 days were completely pointless. But whatever their day that mattered was Saturday. Albert packed his bags early in the morning. I had never seen him so eager to leave before. He hadn't even bothered to tell me I'm leaving in the past few days, just like he had for years. He moved through life as if I didn't exist. Hector left early to take him to the airport. I assumed he'd go quietly and come back the same way. But I was wrong. By the time evening rolled around, Hector was back. But the moment he walked in, I knew something was different. Normally, whenever he saw me, there was always warmth in his eyes. But now, they were burning with anger. "Diana," he said, his voice tense. He didn't even take off his coat before walking straight toward me. I sat down on the couch, unimpressed what happened. I asked. Hector shook his head, frustration written all over his face. "You were right," he said, heatedly, like he was still trying to process it all himself about what I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Hector took a deep breath before speaking quickly. He said, "He'll be back Monday morning. He's leaving the country to go hunting with an old friend there, going to spend time in the woods just like the old days." Albert's usual carelessness didn't surprise me, but for Hector it was the last straw. I looked at him and noticed His fists were clenched. He was furious at his uncle a few days ago. I could still feel that he had a little bit of respect for the man, but now he was just like me. He expected nothing from Albert. Anymore, Hector let out a sharp breath, trying to contain his anger. I just smirked. I told you. I said simply because there was nothing. Left to explain, that night Hector came back. To the house a different man, and we both knew exactly what that meant. Hector took a deep breath, shaking his head, while avoiding my eyes. Diana, I can't comfort you anymore. I'm sorry. I've done everything I could. I've tried to say good things about Albert, but if I keep doing that, I'd just be disrespecting myself. His words settled inside me like a heavy weight, but I didn't even want to talk about Albert and everything he'd done anymore. So I just smiled lightly and said calmly, "Forget it. Hector, let's crack open a couple of beers and please. I just need a normal conversation. I don't even want to hear Albert's name. Right now, talking to you makes me feel better." When Hector looked at me, the anger in his eyes softened. Into understanding, he gave a small nod and headed to the fridge, pulling out 2 beers. I slowly got up as well, but just as I stood, I let the corner of my skirt slide up a little, just enough to be almost unnoticeable. I felt the shift in the air immediately. Hector's eyes flickered down for the briefest second before he quickly looked away, but I caught it. That tension between us spread through the room like a slow breeze when he handed me one of the ice-cold beers. I let my fingers brush lightly over his. A small touch, barely there. But even that was enough. It was the spark that would change the entire night. I wanted this, and I could feel that Hector was starting to want it too. The chill of the beer cooled my lips, but inside a different kind of heat was growing. I had spent so long holding myself back, suppressing my feelings, but now I didn't care anymore. Talking with Hector really did relax me at first. Our conversation was fueled by our shared frustration with Albert, but slowly, the topics became lighter old memories, funny moments from the past, ridiculous stories we told each other, and before we even realized it, we were both tipsy. We were laughing so much, I couldn't even remember the last time I'd laughed like that. The anger, the loneliness, the disappointment, all of it. It disappeared when I was with Hector. Eventually we placed our empty beer bottles on the table and moved to the couch together. The warmth inside me mixed with the pleasant buzz in my head made me sit closer to Hector than I normally would have, too close, maybe even way too close. But I didn't care. Hector turned. To me, his smile still on his lips, but there was something else in his eyes now. A pull, a tension waiting to break. He felt it too. We both did. I swirled the bottle in my hand, locking eyes with him. The slight dizziness in my head made me want to say everything, exactly how I felt it without holding back. So Hector, I sighed, smiling as I leaned in. Just a little more. I really miss talking to you, and I just realized you actually make me happy. Hector swallowed slightly, but his smile didn't fade. You make me feel good too, Diana, he said, slow, his voice carrying a weight. Something he was trying to keep contained, but I wasn't trying to hold anything back. So without hesitation, with all the boldness, I asked the question that would shift everything. Tell me, Hector, is there someone in your life? Hector's smile grew, just a little, like he knew exactly what I was getting at. What do you mean? Hesked, raising an eyebrow slightly. I moved, closer, settling in even more. Next to him now, he felt the tension too. What I mean is, I said, placing my glass on the table and turning to face him, are you lonely too? Hector. A brief silence hung between us. He looked away, gave a slight nod, but didn't say anything. Something stirred. Inside me, I was the one in control now. This time I wasn't going to be the one waiting. So I tilted my head slightly, my voice soft. There's no woman in your life. No one who wants you. Hector swallowed his fingers, twitching slightly against his glass. Condensation, making them slick. He didn't want to talk about this, but at the same time he liked it tonight. There was nowhere left. Torin Hector took a deep breath, avoiding my gaze as he set his beer bottle down. On the table, his voice carried the weight of a confession he'd been holding back. I've been alone for a long time, Diana. His voice was quieter now, and something inside me tightened when he said my name. And to be honest, the only time I feel good is when I'm with you. That sentence sent a wave through me, like a truth that had been waiting maybe for months, maybe years to finally be spoken. I studied his face carefully. His eyes were saying something he felt the same way I did. I traced my fingers lightly around my glass, a slow smile forming on my lips. There was no point in hiding what had been growing inside. Me anymore, Hector? I said, slow and deliberate. Don't we both deserve to feel good? Maybe this is exactly where we're meant to be. I saw his jaw tighten. His hands scurled into fists on his knees for a second, before he relaxed them. He was watching me so intensely that it made my breath hitch. Finally, he couldn't hold it back anymore. His voice came out deep and unshaken, but it trembled just enough to show he had been holding this in for too long. Diana, he whispered. You know, don't you? I can't hide how I feel about you anymore because you're not running either. Everything stopped. I knew exactly what he meant. I wasn't running. I couldn't. Without a second of hesitation, Hector moved his hands, found my face, his thumbs brushing against my cheek as his eyes locked onto mine, and then his lips caught mine. The kiss was like an explosion of every emotion he had been holding back for months, maybe even years. Suppressed desires, unspoken feelings, inert attraction, all of it broke free. At once a small part of me tried to question how we had even gotten to this point, but it was too late for that right. Now there was only Hector's warmth, his strong touch, and this intoxicating moment that had completely taken over me. My hands moved instinctively to his neck fingers, tangling into his hair as it could set him back. I wanted this. I wanted to lose myself in Hector's arms. When I stood up there, wasn't a single trace of hesitation left inside me. The fire burning in me had become uncontrollable, and I had no intention of putting it out. We both deserve more. I whispered my voice, shaking just slightly. I set my beer aside, my fingers reaching for the straps of my dress. Slowly I slid them down my shoulders. The fabric slipped off my body effortlessly, pulling at my feet. Hector's eyes were on me. His breath uneven. I didn't need words to know exactly what he was thinking. I slowly leaned down, placed my hands on his shoulders, and gently pushed him back onto the couch. His eyes never left me, not even for a second. He didn't resist it. It was like he had been waiting for this moment all along. I can't even begin to describe the heat I felt inside me. It was such a massive sense of release and freedom that I truly felt like a woman. Again, that first moment was so beautiful. I couldn't even open my eyes. I could see the same thing happening to Hector. It didn't take long for me to completely let go because I had been neglected for so long. Hector had too as time passed. We were both flushed, red, breathless. Hector was too lost in Themament to even give me compliments. Of course, this time it was going to be like that. This was the first, but it wasn't before long. I let myself go again, my legs trembling and tightening this time. My hands were gripping my thighs and my nails dragged across my own skin again. That was exciting, like I had come back to life. Hector, on the other hand, was like a child. I moved closer, whispered a few words to him, and he finally let himself go, collapsing beside me as if under the influence of alcohol. We looked at each other and laughed. but we were so happy. We were going to spend the next 2 days together, and that was the only thing on our minds. Everything was just beginning as soon as morning came. My AS searched for Hector, and I saw him in the kitchen. I ran straight to him. What happened wasn't going to end here. I've even more beautiful things to tell you in the next story, don't forget to drop a super like, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment for more turning on notifications, and giving a super like will make sure you get these kinds of stories even faster.